Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. When you become a member, enter Suburban Folk in the podcast that you heard about them. A new year brings a new beginning. For all my listeners that own a business, I want to tell you about FedEx Office. If you are just starting or have been running your company for generations, FedEx Office gives you the best way to print marketing materials, posters, signage, graphics, and so much more. With FedEx, creating, editing, saving, and ordering are fast and easy. We are teaming up with FedEx and Podgo to bring our listeners 30% off your next order of $100 or more at podgo.co/FedEx. That's podgo.co/FedEx for 30% off your next order. FedEx, the world on time. We're also brought to you by Purple Carrot. Purple Carrot is the plant-based subscription meal kit that makes it easy to cook irresistible meals to fuel your body. Each week, choose from an expansive and delicious menu of dinners, lunches, breakfasts, and snacks. Every box is an opportunity to learn and experience something new with easy recipes and fresh, pre-proportioned ingredients. No shopping, no food waste. Just globally inspired, restaurant-quality, plant-based meals. Get $30 off your first box by going to purplecarrot.com and entering the code PODGO30 at checkout today. That's PODGO30 and $30 off your first Purple Carrot box. Purple Carrot, the easiest way to eat more plants. And finally, I want to tell you about Yubico. Yubico sets new world standards for simple, secure login, preventing unauthorized access to computers, servers, and internet accounts. The YubiKey from Yubico is a physical security key using two-factor authentication to protect your accounts. As more of us continue to work from home, it is more important than ever to protect your secure information. So what can you do to protect your accounts? Yubico is offering our listeners $10 off your next purchase of $100 or more using the code POD at yubico.com. That's code POD at yubico.com. Say hello to YubiKey and goodbye to account takeovers.
Health, parenting, finance, travel, and home improvement. This is the Suburban Folk Podcast.
Welcome to the Suburban Folk Podcast and Happy New Year. I'm Greg Rodersheimer, your host. To kick off the new year, we have an education and parenting episode. I've been very happy to speak to many people that are at the forefront of innovation in education, and today's guest is no different. Drew Vernon is the marketing director at Tonies. Toniebox is a popular audio system that uses screen-free storytelling to introduce children to the wonders of imagination. Tonies originally launched in Germany in 2016 and is currently one of the fastest growing toy brands in Europe. Drew was nice enough to have a Toniebox sent to me, and it arrived on Christmas Eve, so it was competing with my kids' other Christmas presents. It was a welcome break from screen time for my kids that they could put one of the Tonies onto the Toniebox and listen to a story or listen to some music. And where it really shines is with the Creative Tonie, where the app allows you to record your voice or music, upload that, so to speak, to the Creative Tonie, and then you put that on the Toniebox and it will replay anything that you have uploaded. So the sky really is the limit. If you head over to our YouTube channel, you can see some video of me reviewing the Toniebox, as well as other videos that continue to be uploaded to the channel. If you like what you see, send an email to greg@suburbanfolk.com for your chance to win a free Toniebox. Just be sure to put Tonies, Tonies, in the subject line. Drew, I really appreciate you joining us. Do you want to kick us off by talking about your background and how you got connected with Tonies?
Thank you for having me. It's great to meet you. I have always been interested in marketing. I started out actually as a stockbroker and knew that I wanted to go into marketing. So I went to business school and came out really wanting to understand the fundamentals of what I was doing. So I had the opportunity to go to Procter & Gamble. And I spent a couple of years there, and also with Jergens body lotion. And I learned a ton, but it wasn't something that I was naturally passionate about or curious about. And so I decided I wanted to get into the toy industry, and I had the chance to go over to Lego and manage the preschool business for Lego for about 3 years. And then just recently, earlier in this year, in April, came over to help out with the U.S. launch of Tonies. And so that's kind of a quick background on me. In terms of why I came over, again, it was just, I've always been a fan of Lego and of toys. Obviously, it's part of the American childhood, probably part of every childhood. At first, it was just marketing and, trying to get people to buy stuff. And the longer that I was in it, the more I realized that, hey, this is actually something that I can contribute to from a thought leadership standpoint. This is something where we can take a look at parenting, take a look at early childhood development, and not just make toys that will sell, but make experiences and opportunities for kids to actually learn and to grow and to foster their creativity.
Focusing on that crossover between education and play, in your experience with Lego, were there a lot of programs that used Lego for education experiences? I've done some Google searches, and there are definitely companies out there, none yet really in my area, but just curious how much of a focus within Lego there is on the educational aspects for kids that are really interested in using those toys.
Lego has a long history, and for the first, few decades, I think it was about, hey, what are kids into? What do they enjoy? And you're making fun experiences and selling them. But it was very product focused. And then, comes along the internet where, we start with our e-commerce and we change how the shopping experience is. But what the internet has also done is it has unlocked the power of community, where if you have a brand like Lego or a brand like Tonies, you can not only tell them, we have these great products for you to buy, but you can give them suggestions on, here's what you can do with them. Here are other people in the community who are interested. It's not about what experiences we want you to have. It's about giving you a medium and a system to work with so that you can create your own experiences and to share that with your community.
Community seems especially important right now with what we're having to do with COVID. Thank goodness for the internet to allow a sense of community and interaction while we're all essentially staying in place. I've also heard in some of my discussions with other educators about how school can sometimes be a little too focused on individual achievement and working on your own. So I do think it is very important to make sure that kids learn how to be a community and learn within a team. I'm curious relative to the COVID quarantines, when did you first move over to Tonies from Lego? Was it before everything that's gone on or sometime after?
It was kind of in the middle of things, but it was completely unrelated. So I managed the preschool business over at Lego. While I was at Lego, I actually started up a daycare, which was a drop-in daycare, state licensed. If you wanted to go on a date with your significant other, you want to go grocery shopping without, hands in your face. It was designed to be that space. And so I ran that for about a year and a half, and then things just kind of came together where it was time for a new chapter for me. And I saw the immense opportunity with Tonies, being a successful, fast-growing brand in Europe, and to be part of the launch is something that I knew I didn't want to miss out on.
Tell us more about the inspiration for Tonies and what space in the market that you're hoping that it fills. I know I mentioned in the introduction that screen time is definitely a problem, and it's very important for me to limit my kids' screen time as much as possible. But what else do you foresee for Tonies?
It was created by a couple of dads over in Germany, and they were on the board of a preschool together and noticed that their children's teacher was still using CDs to play stories and songs. And they thought, gosh, CDs have been around forever. They're just as clunky as ever, and kids can't operate them without a parent or a teacher helping them out. So could we upgrade the technology and make it intuitive enough by design so that a child young as 3 could operate it in a screen-free way? So that's the generation story of Tonies. It was not even on the radar at the time. This was back in 2015, 2016. People weren't thinking so much about screens. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry recommends that you give your kids an hour of screen time a day on weekdays and up to 3 on weekends. Well, that's a pre-COVID world. The general measure is, you let your kids look at screens for about an hour a day, and after that, you start to get the parental guilt. Well, I think COVID has kind of thrown parental guilt out the window because we're all just trying to get by. And I get it. I've got 3 kids. They've been on school, off school, hybrid learning, day off. It's so hard to manage. And to have something like the Toniebox, which is already this great tool for kids to use, and operate on their own now in a COVID world where we are trying to give them another tool. We are trying to give them another activity that's not on a tablet, that's not on a smartphone or a TV. So I think it fits in great to the current situation in which we find ourselves.
In your example about CDs, I've found similar instances in the world of education where technology is not quite as up to speed as it would be in other industries. I would imagine the toy industry doesn't have that problem, but have you found that there is a lagging in technology in the educational space as well?
I've learned a lot about the education space over the last 8 months. And one theme that keeps coming up is, teachers they're tireless workers and they work so hard and they often don't have the budgets that they need to get the resources that they need. A lot of times they're going out of pocket to provide things for the classroom. And so they do have CD players and it's just the way that it's been. And the great thing about Tonies and why we've started a program called Tonies for Teachers to get Tonieboxes into classrooms across America is to upgrade that technology, not just for the storytelling device. It's great because you can pop on a character, have your kids, stories, songs. It's great for after school care. But the other thing is that we're finding out that it's a classroom management tool. So now instead of the teacher giving, 10 or 15 minutes of instructions on how she's going to break up the class into 4 groups, she can just tell the class, in this corner, you're going to have a coloring activity. Go to the corner and put your Tonie on the Toniebox, and it's going to walk you through the process. And so it's becoming an extension of the teacher to help him or her run the classroom more efficiently and effectively, which is a benefit above and beyond just the storytelling aspect of what Tonies does.
That is an important distinction, I think, because admittedly, when I went onto the site and am looking around, I saw the Disney characters. My wife is a huge Disney fan, so it feels like I have a radar for that thing at this point, which when you put those on, it will play Disney songs, tell the very familiar stories. But these Creative Tonies allow you to customize what you want to be able to do with them, like you mentioned, for classroom management, which is very, very interesting, or even grandparents being able to use those to tell stories to their kids. I know my parents have used the recording books to tell stories. When you turn the pages, it'll have their voices recording that. So talk a little bit more about that technology.
It might be worth explaining a little bit about how the Toniebox works and the different types of Tonies. So it's basically like a speaker box. It's a 5-inch cube, and you can't really tell until you get one in front of you. It's actually really squeezable and really squishable because it's got a layer of foam on the outer side of the speaker. So it's something that kids can really, whack and roll around. It's very durable, but it's paired with Tonies, and there's 2 types of Tonies. One is called content Tonies. These are the ones that come preloaded with different songs and stories. We've got Rapunzel and, Pinocchio and the Wizard of Oz and all of that. And also the Disney characters and other licensed characters. But we have the Creative Tonies as well, which is basically like an empty hard drive in a character form. So it's fully customizable. You can put up to 90 minutes of your own content on there. So that can be the kid writing their own songs or stories. That can be the teacher, doing pre-recorded instructions for the class. That could be a grandma or a grandpa, reading a favorite bedtime story from across the country and uploading it through the cloud. Both the content Tonies and the Creative Tonies are magnetic. You place them on the top of the Toniebox and it immediately starts playing. So you mentioned the Disney characters. That's what we've introduced to the market right now. So we've just launched in the US in September. We just had a great holiday season, but it is kind of like a launch portfolio where you're going to see some of the Disney characters, which are fantastic. But my vision and the vision of the company is to expand all types of content, all types of different licenses, from favorite storybook characters to blockbuster movie heroes, to non-fictional content, space, volcanoes, dinosaurs, whatever it may be. We're partnering with the best content creators in order to bring this growing library into households and into classrooms.
And that does seem to strike a good balance between structure via the content Tonies and imaginative play via the Creative Tonies, as well as giving parents and teachers the ability to make the Toniebox what they need it to be, as well as fostering creativity for kids. Speaking of that interaction between parents and teachers with the kids, I imagine there is probably the critique of using the Toniebox as a crutch, for example, in reading to your children or other interactions, really in the same way that screens receive that critique? What is the response to somebody that would potentially use this as a replacement for their own interaction?
Yeah, it's all about balance. That can be part of the mix. Every parent is busy, usually working, maybe working from home. Parents need breaks too. And I'll be the first one to say, like, I'm going to put on a TV show now and then for my kids. But now I can also, give them a Toniebox. So you do take the visual element out, which I don't know, like the scientific research behind, the waves and turning your kids into zombies. But I can tell you as a dad, like, I know my kids are a little bit different after, an hour or two of TV. They act differently. I want to avoid that. So if you can take away just some of the time that they're on screens, and it's not just what they're staring at, it's that when you give someone a screen, you give them all parts of a story. There's no burden on the viewer to concoct or to create in their mind. And so that's the other great benefit of Tonies and of screen-free education and entertainment is it puts that burden on the child to actually take the onus of creation to say, what does this mean to you? What do you make of this? And so whether that's guided or whether that's a parent and child together or a child exploring on their own, I think both are great opportunities for growth.
So we've covered the main uses for parents, and I'm really into the uses you've talked about for teachers. What else have you found people are using the Toniebox for?
It's really limitless because when it comes down to it, it is a toy, but it's more than a toy. It's a system and it's a medium. So anything that you need to do over audio, you can do. So you can create like pen pal programs. If you're a school in LA or New York and you want to, find a classroom across the world or across the town, you can create stories and find pen pals. You can do treasure hunts. If each Tonie is a clue to the next piece of the treasure, then that's something, they find the answer to the clue and there's a new Tonie, they go put the Tonie on the box. And so it's really just about interactivity and delivering communication and stories through a new improved format.
We've covered how the adults will use the Creative Tonies to make the program whatever they want it to be. At what point do kids take that over and decide what they want to have recorded on their Creative Tonies?
The two types of Tonies that I've gone to line up really nicely with this kind of consumption and creation or consumption and production model. So the point for me of giving your kids stories, either in a classroom or homesteading, is to give them reference points, to introduce them to the world, to show them how heroes overcome challenges, to show how creativity takes place. And when you get enough of those stories, you start to reassure yourself, you start to get the confidence that I'm not just a consumer. I'm actually a creator. I'm a producer. I'm a writer of my own story. Tonies is one medium that helps me capture that. But very much so, we want to instill this confidence and empower kids to be able to be the writers and the narrators of their own stories. So that's very much what we're doing in classrooms.
What are some of the responses that you've heard around the creative piece and allowing kids to make it what they want it to be? I know in education, one thing you hear as a complaint a lot is the fact that all of the material is handed to kids. They have to take it in, regurgitate it back out on a test, and there's not really critical thinking or problem solving. It is very much step by step.
I think as a society, we're really trained to be reactive and we're trained to follow directions. And a lot of, I spent a lot of time, even in my professional career, waiting for people to tell me what projects to work on, what to go do. I think the people who are the most successful and the kind of kids that I want to raise are the ones we teach. You can go out and make something. If something doesn't exist, don't say, it probably was a bad idea. Say it doesn't exist because nobody really thought about it. Nobody really determined if there was a need for it, and nobody took the initiative to go out and get it. And the reason I love Tonie so much is because we're getting in at the earliest level of life. Kids are only kids once. I heard, 85% of a child's brain is developed by the time they're 3 years old. Let's use this opportunity where we're really not just putting the information into their brains, but we're giving them the tools to navigate that journey. And we do it through storytelling, because that's the first opportunity, and it's the most creative and engaging way to teach kids about problem solving. Every story has a hero that has to overcome an obstacle to get to a reward or a treasure. And those are the building blocks of problem solving that we're teaching our kids.
Also, while we're on the topic of adulthood, something else that strikes me about Tonies is the technology aspect. What I mean is, I know my kids, and I think most kids, see adults, especially their parents, with their phones or other technology, and they want to be like the adults that they see. And this also gives them a piece of technology that they can call their own. And I would think with a little bit of learning, they'd basically be able to use it all on their own. Is that something else that you're going for, is to give kids a piece of technology that allows them to be like the parents or other adults they see in their lives and want to emulate?
Absolutely. I think, parents, I'm guilty of being on my phone in front of my kids. I try not to, but that's something that, we're lying to ourselves if we think that kids aren't going to become screen obsessed when they see mom and dad always checking, the socials. I think to your question, to be able to bring one more reason to get off of a screen and to be able to give that opportunity to a kid. I have been driving my 4-year-old back to preschool while it's been back in session. And, the 15-20 minute car ride is the perfect time to give your kid a Toniebox. It's got a headphone jack. You can put the headphones on if you want, or else you can just let the kids, explore, these classic tales or Disney favorites. And, it engages them, it teaches them, and they're not saying, are we there yet? Or, it's too hot, too cold, I'm hungry, I spilled my crackers or whatever.
For sure. And to be clear, I don't mean technology as a bad thing, just another device that's competing for my kids' attention. For example, I use my phone, surprise, for podcasts quite a bit. So I'm not actually even looking at the screen. I just have podcasts going all the time. So for my kids, I could see them using the Toniebox as their own personal podcast, if you will. Still eliminates the screens, as we've continued to talk about, but it is their own device. They can call their own. And they're acting like daddy does when he listens to his podcast, for example. As far as the controls and being able to operate the Toniebox, how easy is it for kids to be able to use it themselves?
In terms of using the Toniebox, we've got kids as young as 2 that can function around with it. Our safety rating is 3+, just because we do have some small parts in the characters, but it's really designed for those preschool ages at this point. So, ages 2 to 5 is probably the sweet spot. But a lot of that right now comes back to our launch portfolio with, we have the content for the younger kids, but we are in partnership with some of the best content creators that's going to help us age up into, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. I believe that we're an education company as much as we're a toy company. And I've already had people reach out to me from senior citizen centers to say, this is a great little token for grandma or grandpa who's in assisted living to hear from their family, to hear from their kids. And so anything from, infancy to old age, if there's a role for audio, especially delivering audio in a screen-free way, this can serve that need. We're getting military families whose husbands or wives are deployed, and, it's how they stay connected, overseas. So it's really hard to put a number on the targeted age range. Again, it goes by your definition. If it's by available content, that's going to skew more into the preschool area.
That is a great point about seniors. I hadn't really thought of it, but for any of us that have tried to get our parents or grandparents on Zoom, for example, while we've been in lockdown, it can definitely be a challenge. So technology that's easy enough to be used by 3, 4, 5-year-olds, hopefully is easy enough for our elderly parents and grandparents to be able to use as well. And then if it's an additional way that they can communicate between each other, especially for young kids who it's hard to get them on the phone and talk to their grandparents, maybe they'll be able to communicate better with a toy in between. That really is a good idea. And again, I hadn't even really thought of that. One other cohort would be people that don't have as much means financially. We hear a lot about that with virtual school and which kids have access to technology as compared to others, and the threat of them falling further behind. Is that a consideration for you all, especially as you interact with these schools?
Yeah, I think it's a relevant question. And I'll answer it in a couple of different ways. So we are just brand new in our launch, our first holiday season. We're getting out the word out with national press. People are picking them up. It's skewing right now towards the people who, are in a circumstance where they can, spend $100 on the starter set. The content Tonies are about, 15 suggested retail, and the creative Tonies are about 12 each. So that is a consideration, but I think it's important to consider it as a bigger picture of it not just being a toy. If you get this for your child at 2 or 3, this is something that they can grow with. Again, because it's not about necessarily the playability of the toy. It is with the figures, but that can be a growing collection as well. But if you see it as an investment and you see it as a system to be explored, then it brings less of a concern to the initial price. But that being said, I think right now it's at a very accessible price for the average household. If you say, hey, I think this is a great idea, I'd love to have one, I just can't afford it, or it's just not the right time for my household. My goal really is to get Tonies into the hands of every kid in America, regardless of them being able to pay for it. And so that's why we've created Tonies for Teachers. In less than 3 months, we've gotten to over 400 classrooms. I've partnered with 15 museums across America to put these into their play areas. We'll continue to do that next year, just with the intent of getting these boxes into the hands of kids and letting them, explore and play.
For the listeners that still aren't quite getting the picture of what Tonies and a Toniebox is there other players in this space or competition, I could say, that you would compare it to?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see some similar players in the space. I think that it's not direct competition, because I think there are, different segments and different ways to position the branding that are going to be beneficial to all parties. I think at this point, we're very much growing an audio category, audio for kids category. So right now our focus is on figures and the collectability, the tactile play, the squeezability of the box. All of those things are things that we're not being challenged on in terms of competitive entrance.
Cool. And of course, the big question is, for those listeners that are interested in getting their own Toniebox, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so we're available at Tonies.com, at Amazon, at Target.com, in FAO Schwartz, and in about, several hundred independent toy retailers across the country. So you can find, Tonies, or just search for it and go to your preferred retailer.
Sounds good. And of course, I will put links in the show notes to make it easy for people to find the product. Drew, what should people do if they need to contact you or the company?
Please reach out to me. We have a great team at hello@tonies.com. Any notes to Tonies or to me, you can funnel through there. Also, we're updating, everybody on our progress and our updates with Instagram, Tonies.us, on Facebook. And then one thing that I really want to promote, we're starting to see kind of like organic communities. So there's a great growing Facebook community called Toniebox USA, and this has nothing to do with me or anybody at the company. This is just fans and sharing best practices and sharing kind of creative ideas for how to use the Toniebox. So I'd encourage people to follow that as well.
Sounds like we started with community and we will end with an emphasis on the importance of community. Well, Drew, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today, and we'll be in touch.
Great. It's my pleasure, Greg. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or all other major podcasting applications to be notified of our latest episode. You can also join our conversation at suburbanfolk.com or any social media site, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, at the handle Suburban Folk. Thanks for listening.